So Stan, would you talk to us a little bit about how the experience of holotropic breathwork can bring understanding of archetype on a personal level?
Well, it's in a very important, very vital way, because you can actually experience archetypes in what I call holotropic state, which is a certain important subgroup of non-ordinary states that have healing, transformative, evolutionary, and heuristic potential. HEUR means that if you experience them or you work with them, you can get new information about consciousness, about the psyche, which is really paradigm breaking, different from what we have in psychology and psychiatry. And the archetypes are among those that become directly available. Now, archetypes can be seen from three different perspectives. They can be seen in a kind of Homeric way, when they have form of deities, Aphrodite, Mars, Hades, Mercury, whatever. They can be seen from a philosophical perspective, like Platonic forms or ideas. And the third would be a psychological perspective, which was something that Jung brought into psychology, saw them as the governing principles in the collective unconscious. Now, this is very closely related to a debate which went through centuries in philosophy about the Platonic forms or ideas, which are archetypes. And there were two schools, one called itself realist, which is really not a great name for it, and the other was nominalists. So the nominalists were saying these Platonic forms, ideas, they are just names, nominalism. They are abstractions from what we experience in everyday life. So the Great Mother archetype is an abstraction from what we observe in individual mothers. The archetypal image of the world tree is abstraction from the certain properties that we see in individual trees. Now the realists were saying something different. They say no, they have ontological reality. In other words, there's a domain normally invisible which is inhabited by these archetypes. They have real existence, and in a sense there are templates for creation. So individual mothers are expressions of this universal archetype of the mother. The trees, you see, the forms of the trees are informed by the archetype, by the form, by the idea of the tree. And so the work with holotropic states really strongly supports this quote-unquote realistic. I think we should have a better name for that, because usually when they're realistic, we apply to things that are down to earth, square. This is exactly the opposite. But it's that experiential domain is real, and we all have the possibility of experiencing it. But it's not something that we experience in the ordinary state of consciousness. But they become available, and many people experience actually the archetypes in a specific cultural inflection. Not only the Great Mother, universal Great Mother, but you can experience specific forms of Great Mothers. You can experience Virgin Mary. You can experience Cybele, or other of these Great Mother goddesses. The same way you can experience different types of paradises. The paradise of the Eskimo people, for example, is when you die, you become a spirit in the Aurora Borealis, and we would be involved in playing with the head of a walrus, and the energy of the play creates Aurora Borealis. If it's a Celtic or Celtic paradise, there are beautiful gardens with multicolor horses. The Garden of Eden is a little different. The Muslims have the more kind of secular form of paradise. There are the beautiful girls, houris, always ready for sexual pleasure. They return to virgins after each lovemaking. There are rivers of honey and pure water, and there are incredible feasts available. Men have potency multiplied, and so on. And so, even if you never studied these mythologies, you can experience them in non-ordinary states of consciousness. So it's a very, very powerful confirmation for the, if you want, objective reality of the ontological reality of that archetypal realm. It can be experienced as real or even more real than what we experience in everyday life. The archetypal beings, for example, are endowed with enormous energy, and when you experience them, they also elicit tremendous emotions, which could be anything from horror to ecstatic rapture, depending on the nature of the deity. The archetypal realm has a certain kind of a space and linear time. So in other words, you can see the deities in a specific context, and you can see sequences. You can see a battle between the Titans and the Olympic gods, or the Nordic Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, and so on. So there's action happening in a certain space. Now, what that archetypal world doesn't have is coherence. For example, you can say how far is from London to Paris, and which direction you would find Paris. You can say how long it was between, what the time that elapsed between the Bolshevik Revolution and the French Revolution. You cannot say how far is it from Shiva's heaven to the Sumerian underworld and which direction. Or how much time elapsed between this battle of the Titans for Olympus and Ragnarok. So these kind of images, they unfold or explicate, to use David Bohm's terminology, out of this timeless matrix. Suddenly the world is there, and then there's another world, but there's no transition, there's no connection, which we have here. The space-time is really all interconnected. There's time and space coordinates in which you can orient yourself. But generally the energy, the intensity of the experience is much smaller, unless we have a volcanic explosion or atomic bombs or tsunami or something. You don't get quite the power of the energies that the archetypal world has.